So this weekend, I got another Medal of Honor recipient to talk about. I wanted to talk about one of the first people who was a foreigner to actually win this medal. It'd be the first Filipino to do it, Army Captain Jose Calugas. Now, he would win this at the Battle of the Philippines, and let's just talk about it really quick. At the age of 23 in the 1930s is when he would actually join the Filipino Scouts. For those of you who may not fully know, the Filipino Scouts were part of the American Army, technically, because the Philippines were under our control at the time. And it was just another separate force that would be fighting on the island during this Battle of the Philippines, and would actually kind of be like their own guerrilla force even after we lost control of the Philippines as well, those who were able to make it out and not fully surrender at Bataan. Now, some of these guys would actually fight and get their citizenship after World War II. For those who may not know, a foreigner can still be a U.S. citizen as long as they sign up and serve for X amount of years. It's pretty interesting because you can actually sign up from, not gonna say everywhere in the world, but it's kind of weird where you can sign up from. Like, I've seen people who become U.S. citizens from Jamaica and Vietnam and stuff like that by signing a contract to work with the U.S. military. I'm not sure how many years it works, but they do that. Now, Jose would be trained in artillery at Camp Sill in Oklahoma, and he would be signed to the 88th Artillery Regiment. Now, early in 1942, the Battle of the Philippines is already kicked off. Japan is making their way down the island. The Allies are losing land day by day, and they're slowly retreating out of Luzon right now. And they have been pushed back to Bataan, and this is where Jose currently is. Now, at this point, Jose is working in a mess hall. He's not really doing his artillery job that he is trained for. He is just feeding his battalion and cooking food, making sure everybody's getting the nourishment that they need to continue the fight against the Japanese right now. But this would change, and his training would need to kick in right now, because January 16th, 1942, one of the nearby artillery emplacements would actually be bombed and have artillery shells rain down on it, which would either kill or wound every single cannoneer that was placed at this battery right now. And that would be a little bit of an issue, and the guns would fall silent, not fighting back against the Japanese. Now, Jose would notice this silence and find that it's a little bit weird. Like, hey, we're not returning fire against the Japanese. What the hell happened? And well, one of the guns was actually heavily damaged when it got bombed, and Jose would get about 16 volunteers right around him to march, or well, probably sprint and run a half mile to the batteries that just got bombed, while they themselves are getting shelled and bombs dropped all around them to stop them from getting to that battery. Now, some of the guys, they would not make it to this battery to help out. They would actually just get pushed back and be forced back to their original camp. But Jose and a handful of people would make it to this battery, and they would fix the guns that were there that needed fixed, and his training would kick in and that they needed at that moment. Now, Jose and his group of volunteers would fight back against the Japanese for several hours. The artillery emplacement that he just went to would trade blows with the Japanese over and over for several hours until the Japanese guns would go silent. And then, as usual, Jose would go back to his camp, and he would go back to the mess hall and go back to feeding his troops and making sure they were well nourished again, because they were starving. But Jose would end up surrendering with a lot of other people at Bataan after the battles were done, and the U.S. decided that they could not hold on any longer. But he would make it through the death march. He would not get killed. It wasn't too terrible for him in particular, but that's because he kind of tricked the Japanese a little bit. Now, he was already aware that he was going to get the Medal of Honor after his blows with the Japanese on the artillery guns. It was made aware to him about a month after that happened, but he knew that if word got out that he was getting a Medal of Honor, that would make the Bataan Death March 10 times worse for him. And he would probably especially get picked on by the Japanese a lot. So he kept himself quiet. He made sure that everybody else who knew about his Medal of Honor would also keep quiet. Now, in the middle of this march, it's not really stated when or where, he would contract malaria. Now, malaria could be deadly, and it's kind of why, like, if you contracted it, the Japanese really paid a lot less attention to you, because there was a good chance that you probably wouldn't make the rest of the march, and they didn't really want to have anything to do with the disease either. So he would contract it, but he would get over it rather quickly. But he knew that if he faked this disease and continued faking it until he made it to the POW camps, it would make this march a whole lot easier for him. And it did. He would make it to the POW camps, and he would spend the next, like, roughly year working and, well, not really working, but being tortured and very malnourished and not having a great time at all at these POW camps, you know, in typical Japanese fashion at the time. But in 1943, he would be released to go work in the rice mills after the Japanese were kind of done with him. But these rice mills, they're kind of, I would say they're kind of similar to like a German concentration camp. They're not really as brutal as just a POW camp outright, but you're still going to be under supervision from the Japanese. They really don't want you doing anything else besides working in that rice mill. But he would come across a team of guerrilla spies in the Philippines. And while he was working at this rice mill, he would continue spying on Japanese movements and letting the guerrillas know, like, hey, this is what they're doing. You guys, if you want to hit them here and stuff like that. It's just keeping track of supplies movements and troop movements. But the guerrillas would bust him out of the rice mills in October of 1943. And he would actually help them fight the Japanese until the Allies were able to liberate the Philippines in 1945. It's not really known a whole lot about what he did with the guerrillas. Jose wasn't really the kind of guy to talk about his story a lot. It was really just what was reported on by other people who worked alongside him. So he was more of a guy that you had to read about rather than listen to. And he would receive his Medal of Honor in April 30th of 1945. Now, he was the only Filipino to be awarded a Medal of Honor all the way up until the year 2000. It's crazy. So we're going to get into a little bit of after the war of what he did. He would stay in the Army under the 44th Infantry Regiment, and he would just kind of go until he would retire in 1957. Now, during this service, he would get his citizenship for the U.S. and he would be moved to Fort Lewis in Washington. Now, he would kind of stay in Washington from now on. And he would work on getting his family over there too, his wife and 4 kids. And they would end up joining him in the Americas in 1963. Now, during this time after retirement, he would kind of just spend the days in the summer farming and stuff, and he would actually get a degree and go and work for Boeing until 1972. This is when he would just permanently retire and he would start to enjoy a nice and long life and passed away at the age of 90 on January 18th, 1998. Now, there's a reason why I said you kind of had to read about him, because those were words from his daughter-in-law. She would say he never liked to talk about his accomplishments. Instead, we had to read about him in like news articles and news clippings and all that stuff. Any type of thing that would deal with TV about his story. But that's the story of one of the first foreign Medal of Honor winners of World War II. Let me know if you guys want me to cover anybody else who may have won this medal, or maybe they didn't win this medal, but they got like a distinguished service cross and they were wrongfully denied but still have a badass story to them. Let me know in the comments down below, and I'll see you guys for another video later.